Good evening. Let's take our hymn books and turn to hymn number 260. 260. Holy Spirit, dwell in me. Two six zero. Number 261, God is here. Number 262, 'Tis the Blessed Holy Spirit. 262.
So we are live streaming. I discovered that YouTube changed something that broke our system. They probably emailed it to me and told me, sort of like mailing the mailbox.
Yeah.
And
Tom picked up the mailbox today, so went and killed grass, and I said, be sure and look in there. We had one piece of mail. It was a notice telling us that our mailbox was going to be taken down and where to locate our replacement mailbox. It had a picture.
well, I figure probably YouTube sent me something too, but I didn't notice it. But we did actually get the stream working this morning. It's just like halfway through. But Jennifer was on, and Nanette, so that was encouraging. Right now, I think it's just us, though. I don't think anybody's on, but we should. So it makes Matthew work harder. We had it to, I mean, basically you just hit two buttons and it would start streaming, but now he has to start the stream and then go in and update where the stream is located, and then, but he can handle that. So
He knows what to do.
Isaiah 41. So I like one of the fiction genres that I like are courtroom cases. You know, especially the small time lawyer going up against the big city lawyers, and sort of a little bit like Matlock or so I like reading those kinds of books. And of course, they always pull the rabbit out of the hat and at the last minute and they win the case. Well, this is a case they would not win because chapter 41 is basically we're going to be in a courtroom. Only God is the judge, and the plaintiffs are those who have turned away from him. And he's going to give them an opportunity. Plead your case. Show me why you're right and I'm wrong. Okay, we can go home now because
No, that's not gonna
we already know the answer or the end of this one. But nonetheless, that's what chapter 41 is. So it starts out, I mean, we ended actually, let's look back at chapter 40. We ended after a lengthy discussion on God's power and what he has done and what he can do. And we ended there at verse 29 through 31. He giveth power to the faint, and to them that have no might he increaseth strength. Even the youth shall faint and be weary, and the young men shall utterly fall. But they that wait upon the Lord shall renew their strength. They shall mount up with wings as eagles. They shall run and not be weary, and they shall walk and not faint. That whole idea of waiting on the Lord is when you come to the realization, I can't do it. Without God's help, I'm in trouble. And the reason why I'm looking at this is because verse 1 of chapter 41 says, keep silence before me, O islands, and let the people renew their strength. Do you notice a difference there? Wait on me, on the Lord, and the Lord will renew their strength. And now he's saying, let the people renew their strength. He's giving them every opportunity. These are ones who choose not to wait on the Lord, who instead go their own way. That would describe, all of the nations around Israel. He's going to give them their opportunity to plead their case and show why they're strong enough on their own. And so with that in mind, let's take a look. Keep silence before me, O islands. Again, verse 1 ends with, come near together to judgment. Keep silence before me. That's not like coming into a courtroom. What happens at the start of a case?
All rise for the Honorable Judge Smith. And then we stop talking, we stand up, the judge comes in, and then I think somebody says, you may be seated.
Mm-hmm.
Or that might be Sunday mornings.
That's similar. And at that point, the only person talking had better be the judge or at appropriate times, the attorneys. And even the plaintiffs aren't supposed to speak. And so God's saying, keep silence before me. And then he says, oh, islands. Now, we've come across this phrase islands or isles before. And it can mean a lot of different things. And we see it multiple times in Isaiah. So keeping your finger in Isaiah 41, let's just go back to Isaiah chapter 11. Too bad that's not the right one. That's a really good one, though. Well, I have the wrong reference. You can look at that one. It's a really good really good verse, but it's not what I was looking for. But Isaiah chapter 20 and verse 6, and the inhabitants of this isle shall say in that day. And what it means there is not an island. This isn't Gilligan's Island, This is a territory. And so sometimes it might be talking about an actual isle off the coast there of the, what sea's over there? Mediterranean Sea. It might be the Isle of Cyprus. But oftentimes, and based on the context, you have to determine, is it talking about an actual island, or is it talking about, if you look at the United States of America, we're sectioned off into little islands. Okay, not really, but we're sectioned off into states. And so that's the same idea here. And so keep silence before me, O islands. And as we go down through, we're going to find out he's talking to those nations that have rejected him. And so which fits? Little tiny islands or territories? Territories. So keep silence before me, O territories, O islands, and let the people of these territories renew their strength. Again, in chapter 41, you renewed your strength by waiting on the Lord, and he renewed your strength. Now, these nations are sitting in the courtroom, and God says, you better be prepared. You want to get a judge mad at you? Come in as an attorney not prepared. You'll hear from that judge. I know this because I read fictional accounts of courtroom. But he's saying prepare for court. And then, and it's also, as we're going to find out, it's an ironic phrase because they can't. They can't renew their strength enough to be able to stand up against God. And so, God's saying, go ahead, renew your strength, get your case, get ready to lay it out. And then he says, let them come near, then let them speak. He's going to give them their chance. They're not going to be able to say, but God, you never gave us a chance. He's giving them their chance. Let them speak, and then let us come near together to judgment. And we'll make a final judgment. You're presenting your case, you prepare yourself the best you can, and we ultimately are going to resolve it with a judgment, a decision. Verse 2, who raised up the righteous man from the east, called him to his foot, gave the nations before him, and made him rule over kings. He gave them as the dust to his sword, and as driven stubble to his bow. Okay, so who is the righteous man? Well, there's a lot of debate on this. There are some Bible scholars who say that this is Abraham. Abraham's declared to be a righteous man. But did Abraham rule over kings?
No.
Yeah. So who could this righteous man be? It definitely could be Jesus, except this is one of those things where it's past tense, although I think we're going to find that it's talking about a future event, but prior to the millennial reign of Christ, which is where he would fulfill as a righteous man. So who's going to conquer the nations righteously, thinking in the future, because again, where is Israel right now? They're under siege.
Right. They're about to be attacked by Assyrians.
In
the near future, they'll be sacked by Babylon.
Okay, that's where I was heading with this.
Right.
So looking at Babylon, well, we certainly wouldn't.
When I said near future, I meant their near future, not
Yeah,
from
correct.
our
Yes,
standpoint.
yes. And so after that, they're going to be in exile for 70 years. How do they get to come home?
Nehemiah.
Pardon?
Nehemiah?
Yeah.
So Nehemiah is going to come back to do the wall. Before Nehemiah, you have Ezra the priest coming back for the temple. But how did that happen?
Well, the king Cyrus gave them permission.
Cyrus.
It was
Yeah.
Cyrus.
And who is King Cyrus?
He was the king of Persia.
Mm-hmm. And he's the one who united the Medes and the Persians. Mm-hmm. And what did they do with their united effort? They took down Babylon, but not just Babylon. They conquered territory after territory after territory and fulfilled this. Okay, came from the east. Well, of course, from Judah, they were from the east. And also from Babylon. When they were in exile, they were from the east. Called him to his foot, gave the nations before him, and made him rule over kings. That's kind of a strange phrasing. Called him to his foot, gave nations before him. But what Cyrus did was he conquered nations that he had never been before. He'd never walked there. But when it came time, he walked through them. He conquered them. God gave him over to him, driven as stubble to his bow. So Cyrus the Great, king of Persia, uniter of the Medes and the Persians, conquered Babylon in 539 BC. And at that time allowed the first round of Jews to head back to Jerusalem. So who raised up the righteous man? Verse 3, I actually got ahead of myself. He pursued them and passed safely, even by the way that he had not gone with his feet. So I was ahead of myself a little bit. But that's what Cyrus did. Once he got started, there was no stopping him. He hadn't been there before. He didn't have to be. We'll find out in a little bit. God was on his side. and so he was able to continue. He easily conquered nations that he had not had contact with before. He hadn't had. Lost the word.
Diplomatic relations.
Thank you. That's exactly the word I was going. What was political, but yeah, diplomatic relations with. Yes.
I don't know too much about King Cyrus. I'm just wondering, based on your study, was he like considered a very fair king?
Hold on to that thought because we're actually going to look into that when we get a little bit further down here. We're going to return to him, and that's an excellent question. But yeah, I mean, who raised up the righteous man? We're going to look at history's perspective of him and Bible perspective of him. And okay, plot spoiler, but yes, he was righteous and just in his actions, even how he ruled the nations that he conquered. I mean, even letting the Jews come home, that was a righteous action. Okay, so then we come to verse 4, and remember, we're in this courtroom scene. Who raised up the righteous man? Verse 2, well, who was it? That was God, the one who's calling them together for judgment. Verse 4, who hath wrought and done it, calling the generations from the beginning. I, the Lord, the first, and with the last, I am he. And so, first of all, we recognize the name of God, the first and the last. Where else do we see that?
Alpha and Omega.
Yeah.
Revelation.
Yeah, Revelation chapter 1, verse 17, chapter 2, verse 8, and then chapter 22, we see it again. Who claims to be the first and the last there in Revelation?
Well, God, but Jesus.
Jesus,
more
yeah.
Specifically.
Yeah, and so here we have God, the Lord God, taking that title, the first and the last. You know what? There can only be one first and the last. Because if you're the first, there can't be anyone before you, so they can't be first. And if you're the last, there can't be anyone after you, so they can't be last. And so for Jesus to claim that title either meant he didn't understand basic logic, or
He was, in fact, the Son of God.
yeah, he's God.
God.
The triune Godhead. Again, find the word Trinity for me. Go ahead. But find the teaching of Trinity. You find it throughout the Bible, and this is one of those examples. Okay, so there are some commentaries that then look at the last phrase, I am he. What could you walk away with from that? Talking about titles of God.
Well, I see I am.
Okay.
When Moses said, who shall I say sent me? He said, tell them I am.
There's one little bit of a problem.
I noticed that the am is italicized.
Yeah.
So probably they put that in for grammatical.
Exactly. So
reasons.
that probably isn't a title, but it's certainly one that God could use. I am that I am. And so I don't have any great argument with those who want to choose that as a title also. And so then verse 5 is again picking up on this future past event. It's still in the future when this is written, but it's written as if it had already occurred. Why? Because God sovereignly decreed it. And so Isaiah could speak of it as having happened, even though it had not yet happened. And so when Cyrus comes through conquering all of these nations, what do the nations around him think of that? Well, let's take a look. Verse 5, the isles saw it. Again, not the islands here, but the territories. The territories saw it and feared. Yeah. If you, put yourself in Jerusalem's shoes or sandals when the Assyrians were sweeping down through. Remember, that was a multi-year campaign, but they were unstoppable. They put up a siege around a city, they destroyed it, they killed everybody inside, or they dragged them off to someplace else. They went to the next city, they put a siege around it, they killed everybody inside, except for the ones they dragged off, and now they're there by Jerusalem. Do you think there was some fear?
Anybody with a brain, yeah.
So the Medes and the Persians are sweeping through.
Yeah.
Do you think there was some fear?
Yeah.
And so the isles saw it and feared. The ends of the earth were afraid. So even those that were far away heard about it, and they were afraid because it looked like the Medes and the Persians were unstoppable. They drew near and came. And so what was their response? They're fearing the onslaught of the Medes and the Persians.
Chapter 41.
As Bible-believing Christians, what would we tell them their response should be? Yes, Emily.
Make peace. Go to them before they come to you.
Could be. There are some places in the Bible that certainly give that principle.
Say, follow God.
Yeah. Don't, if you're afraid, turn to God.
He's the only one that could stand against them, it seems.
So this is what they did. And you know what? Verse 6 sounds nice. It does. It sounds nice. They helped everyone his neighbor, and everyone said to his brother, be of good courage.
That is good.
Yeah.
But it'd be even better if the person that was telling you to be courageous and who was helping you actually had any power whatsoever.
Exactly. I mean, yeah, you can, hip hip hurrah all you want, but the Medes and the Persians, they just keep coming. It would be so much better if they encouraged one another and said, turn to the Lord, humble yourself, fall to your knees, confess your sins before God. And so that's the first thing they did was they said, be of good courage. We can handle this. Okay, they couldn't, but they said they could. Verse 7, it gets worse. So the carpenter encouraged the goldsmith, and he that smoothed with the hammer encouraged, I'll put the word in there, him that smote the anvil, saying, it is ready for the soldering. And he fastened it with nails that it should not be moved. What were they building?
Sounds like weapons to me. A shield.
Good.
Although the goldsmith, gold is not used for weapons. It's not good for that.
No.
But it is
Looks
used
fancy.
to make idols.
Ah. And remember
And
last
the
chapter.
carpenter, they're made of wood. They're made of gold. Smoothed with a hammer. He that smote the anvil, that would be blacksmith. So iron.
And remember last chapter when God was showing his greatness, it asked, to whom will ye liken God? And then it immediately went to the workman melteth a graven image, the goldsmith spreadeth it over with gold, and if you're poor, you get the best wood that you can. So I think you'll understand it when we move on, but yeah, I think it's talking about idols. So what was their response? Hey, we can do it. Let's build idols and we'll pray to them. That was their response. By the way, just notice for a moment that phrase, and he fastened it with nails that it should not be moved. Because we're going to come down to God's response in a moment. And let's just say God doesn't need to be fastened down with nails to not move. So verse 8 begins, but thou, Israel, art my servant, Jacob, whom I have chosen, the seed of Abraham, my friend. And we'll just stop right there. There's a lot in that verse. First of all, he calls Israel, he calls Jacob. Why is that appropriate?
Well, Israel and Jacob are the same guy.
Yeah, because Jacob became
Changed
Israel.
his name
Yeah.
from Jacob to Israel.
Do you remember what Israel meant?
God be with us.
No, you're on the right track because the L is God.
I sure don't.
Governed or ruled by God. And so to go from Jacob, which of course meant supplanter, deceiver, to go from that to Israel, ruled by God. So it starts out, but thou Israel, art my servant. Jacob, whom I have chosen, supplanter and deceiver. He wasn't chosen for his sterling qualities. He was chosen because God chose him. The seed of Abraham what? My
Friend.
My friend.
friend.
Wow. I'd
What-
like to read that about yourself.
Which is closer, a servant or a friend?
Friend.
And so we have, Israel's whole basis is the friendship with Abraham, the choosing of Jacob and Esau, as God's chosen servant. By the way, you said, how would you like to be called that? Let's take a look at a couple things. 2 Chronicles chapter 20. 2 Chronicles chapter 20, we have Abraham recognized in this way. Verse 7. you want to go ahead and read it?
Art not thou, O our God, who didst drive out the inhabitants of this land before thy people Israel, and gavest it to the seed of Abraham, thy friend forever?
Okay, so Abraham was recognized as being a friend of God in the Old Testament. Let's go to the New Testament. James chapter 2, verse 23. First person there, go ahead and read it. James chapter 2, verse 23.
In the scripture it was fulfilled, which saith, Abraham believed God, and it was imputed unto him for righteousness, and he was called the friend of God.
Okay, so Abraham was known as a friend of God, both Old Testament and New Testament. Cindy, you said, wouldn't it be great if we were known as the friend of God? Take your Bibles, turn to John 15. Anyone want to guess what color the words are? Yes, they are. Words of Jesus. John chapter 15 and verses 14 and 15. Ye are my friends, if ye do whatsoever I command you. Henceforth I call you not servants, for the servant knoweth not what his Lord doeth. But I have called you friends, for all the things that I have heard of my Father, I have made known unto you. Now, specifically, of course, he's talking to his disciples, but I think the principle carries through the whole idea of fellowship that we talked about this morning in 1 John chapter 1. Walking in the light of God brings about obedience and brings you that close fellowship to where we can be friends of God. Now, we have to be careful because God is still God. We better treat him better than we sometimes treat our friends. But we can be friends of God. And Israel was known, in comparison to the territories around, was known as being faithful, a servant and a friend. Notice I said in comparison. Why?
Well, as a human, he wasn't perfect.
And not even just, not Abraham or Jacob or Israel the person, but Israel the nation.
Oh, well, they failed over and over again.
They oftentimes were not righteous. They oftentimes were not faithful.
But they always were God's special people.
Exactly. And they did respond to his chastening. Sometimes he had to discipline them quite harshly, but they always did respond. And so that's what it says here in Isaiah. I'm still in James. Isaiah. That's the comparison that it's showing. Isaiah chapter 41 and verse 8. But thou. So you've got those who are fearing the Medes and the Persians, and so they're just trying to cheer each other on, and they're building idols, so they've got some kind of a defense. In contrast to that, Israel, you art my servant, Jacob, whom I have chosen, the seed of Abraham, my friend, thou whom I have taken from the ends of the earth, and called thee from the chief men thereof, and said unto thee, thou art my servant, I have chosen thee, and not cast thee away. Can you think of times where God gathered the children of Israel in from distant places?
Closer.
From the ends of the earth is what it says here.
Well, when he gathered them all in from Egypt.
Okay, there's one. Yep, they were in Egypt. They had gone there for survival and then ended up as slaves, and he delivered them from there.
Which verse are you in?
Verse 9, Isaiah 41, verse 9. When else?
Got it?
Past or future will he?
I was going to say, when he gives them their land back, well, they get their land back partially during the tribulation and the temple back, but then afterwards, in the millennium,
Yeah.
the tribulation, they're delivered.
Exactly. During the tribulation, he's going to gather them together. For the first time, a lot of people are going to know that they're Jews, which, we've talked about that. Sometimes these genetic, what do you call it, DNA tests. people find out about their background, things that they either didn't imagine or in some cases would prefer not to find out. There's going to be people during the tribulation period that find out they're Jews, but it'll actually be a very positive thing. And ultimately, national Israel will be restored, will be saved, and they'll enter into the millennial kingdom, and they will receive all of the promises that God gave them. So he's going to bring them back together then. He also brought them back out of Babylon. Now, that's only Judah. That's not all 12 tribes, because the 10 tribes are gone. Judah and Benjamin are the only ones that are restored.
Well, they're gone to us, but they're not gone to him.
Right, yes.
We don't know where they are or who they are.
They don't know who they are. Exactly.
But God knows.
Yeah, exactly. All right, moving on. Verse 11. Verse 10. Fear thou not. Now, who's he talking to? Let's keep the context. In verse 8, you got that little paragraph marker thing there. So this is still part of that. So he's talking to the nation of Israel. Fear thou not, for I am with thee. Be not dismayed, for I am thy God. I will strengthen thee, yea, I will help thee, yea, I will uphold thee with the right hand of my righteousness. What's a repeating word you see right there?
I am.
Okay, there is I am, yep.
I will.
I will. And this is something we actually see for the remainder of the passage, is God's going to be telling them the things that I will do. I will do. It's the I will. It's God's I will passage. Our adversary Satan has an I will passage too. Do you remember where that was?
I will ascend above.
Yeah, Isaiah 14. In God's case, every I will is on behalf of the nation of Israel. In Satan's case, every I will was on behalf of Satan. You see the difference between God is love and Satan is a liar and a murderer and proud and arrogant. So anyway, fear not, for I am with thee. Be not dismayed, for I am thy God. I will strengthen thee. Yea, I will help thee. Yea, I will uphold thee with the right hand of my righteousness. We talked about the idols needing to be nailed down. God's going to uphold them with his right hand. He doesn't need to be nailed down. His right hand is more than sufficient. Verse 11. Behold, all they that were incensed against thee shall be ashamed and confounded. They shall be as nothing, and they that strive with thee shall perish. Again, God's telling Israel, because of your faithfulness, because you waited on me to renew your strength, I'm going to do just that. And those who were opposed against you, they're going to be destroyed. They're going to perish. Verse 12, they're not only going to perish, but thou shalt seek them and shall not find them. Even them that contend with thee, they that war against thee shall be as nothing and as a thing of naught. And we've talked before, many of the people groups that went against Israel, they're gone. You don't find them anymore. Verse 13, for I, the Lord thy God, he repeats it, will hold thy right hand, saying unto thee, fear not, I will help thee. So I guess not repeating, he's saying, I'm going to hold your right hand. I'm guessing he's holding our right hand with his right hand, that mighty right arm. And then we come to verse 14. And it's like this major switch, but I think we'll understand it. Fear not, thou worm Jacob. Now, I don't know about you, but if someone calls me a worm,
You'll take that as a compliment.
not normally. Now, that said, I can't show you one. If you come to River Rapids Library in Chesaning and you get a library card, now because you're not in the village or the township, you'd have to pay for it. But if you did, it's a really good library. We will take out 2 library cards and we'll say, which one would you like? And one of them has a book and the other one has a bookworm. Exactly. And you get to pick which one. I think the bookworm is leading by quite a bit. But normally if you call someone a worm, that's kind of a negative thing. And so fear not, you worm Jacob. And then he says, and ye men of Israel. Now, if I were to make a choice, I guess I would rather be called a having Isaiah.
I think he's just reminding reminding us of might and the fact that we are frail and prone to fail. And yet, with all of that, he's still saying, I will help thee, saith the Lord, and thy Redeemer, the Holy One of Israel.
I
So
think-
even if you fail, even if you're weak, even if you can't do it, and since you're a worm, we're pretty sure you can't. You can't,
I
but
think
I can.
I think you're exactly right, because again, Jacob by name, supplanter, deceiver; by action, supplanter, deceiver. You know, he tried to cheat his way through life until God finally got a hold of him and reversed his thoughts and said, "You're now Israel." That's Israel's beginnings. It's good to be reminded. I'm not here because of me. I'm here because of God. And so I agree. I think that's exactly right. And he says, not only does he say, I will help thee, saith the Lord, but he says, and thy Redeemer, the Holy One of Israel. That word Redeemer, do you know what kind of Redeemer that is?
Like the kinsman.
Kinsman Redeemer, Ruth chapter 2. Same concept, but 5 times it's associated with the Holy One of Israel. Who would that kinsman redeemer be?
Jesus.
Yeah, exactly. He's
and
our
he's of Israel.
exact.
Which
Yeah.
I'm not,
No.
but he is.
Yep. And then for verse 15, okay, how many of you have read, okay, I will accept watch the movie. How many have ever read The Mouse That Roared? Okay, so The Mouse That Roared was, you know, the little Duchy of Grand Fenwick challenges America to war, and then they accidentally win. So the idea that this little tiny duchy, they wanted to lose so that America would rebuild them, because that's what America does after we. So
Right.
they wanted to win. I mean to lose, but they accidentally won because they kidnapped the maker of the atomic bomb with the bomb. It's one of those stories. It's fun just to read, but it's one you're supposed to analyze because there's lots of political thought put into it. But anyway, to understand verse 15, you have to reread first part of verse 14. Fear not, thou worm Jacob. Behold, I will make thee a new sharp threshing. I'm going to turn you into this thing with teeth. You're going to be a worm that's a threshing instrument having teeth. Thou shalt thresh the mountains and beat them small, and shall make the hills as chaff. Worms don't do that. Okay, in science fiction, sometimes worms have these big teeth, but in reality, worms don't have teeth. And God says, I'm going to take you, little worm, and I'm going to give you teeth. Thou shalt fan them after making the hills as chaff, threshing the mountains. By the way, I'm reasonably confident God's not talking about actually just flattening out mountains. So what's he talking about here?
Overcoming obstacles. The mountains could be nations.
I think so. I think the leadership of nations.
Yeah. And they can seem insurmountable. Just like when the Grand Duchy of Fenwick sailed into New York Harbor, they were not really expecting to come and be feared. That U.S. was like a big mountain to them. Like, well, there's not much we can really do to move this.
With their bows and arrows.
Yeah.
Yes.
But they did.
Yeah. And so God's going to give Israel teeth. Verse 16, thou shalt fan them, because now the hills are as chaff, so you fan them and blow them away. The wind shall carry them away. The whirlwind shall scatter them. And thou shalt rejoice in the Lord and shalt glory in the Holy One of Israel, because it's not the worm that did this. It's God that did it.
You were going to talk about Cyrus.
We're not there yet. You may have to come back next week, because we don't get back to him until verse 25. And I think I'm actually going to stop here, because this is actually a pretty good point to stop. So what we have is this intermission during this court trial So the nations are on trial because they haven't waited on the Lord. They've tried to do it on their own. They're on trial. But now we're taking this interlude and saying, but look at Israel who has waited on the Lord, and I will keep my promises. I will uphold him with my right arm. I will give him teeth like a threshing machine, and I will uphold him. We're going to come back to the courtroom case. And so I think we're going to break here, and we'll pick up with this next week. And we will definitely talk more about Cyrus when we get to verse 25. So, questions or comments about what we covered?
I have one question.
Okay.
I understood the part where, Jacob was a servant, and that, I think, did he not say that these were future events happening to Babylon? Babylon was going to,
Right. When Isaiah was writing this, Babylon was not yet a world power.
and he was talking about when the men were fearful, they were fearful of the Medes and Persians, but
Mhm.
then the next slot was Babylonians.
No. In order of history, is that what you're asking?
I think I might have the order mixed up.
Right. Because the Assyrians were conquered by the Babylonians. The Babylonians were conquered by the Medes and the Persians. And the Medes and the Persians were conquered by Rome, yeah. And so, but when you're reading through Isaiah, it's really easy to get things out of order
Isaiah
because
pops back and forth like
he does.
it was nothing.
Yeah,
I've met people like that.
yeah. But by careful examination of the context of what we know about history, you can usually piece it together. But that's one of the reasons why Isaiah is not studied a lot.
It's
Is
a challenge.
Isaiah's not what?
not studied very often.
Oh,
Again, this is the first time I have ever done a book study all the way through Isaiah. I'm enjoying it. But there are parts of it that are very challenging to who is it talking about and when? And so it's really easy to get following along in Isaiah to get confused on the order of things. All right. Let's close in prayer. Oh, Bethany was in touch with Jerry. They got Kay's apartment all moved, and so she's regaining her strength. Not Kay, but Jerry is today after making that move. But Kay is doing very well. She walks from her room down to therapy.
So she's still at Briarwood.
Right. Again, just making really good progress. The one sad thing was Kay's cat was stressed out over all of this. They took, I don't know if it's a him or her, but took them to the vet, and at the vet it had a heart attack and died. But Kay's handling it really well. The cat was 17 years old, so a long life. Obviously had cardiac issues, and this was too much for it. So keep Kay in your prayers. But Jerry said that Kay was dealing with that really well because she'd had the cat for a long time, and probably there'll come a time.
Reggie.
Pardon?
Reggie.
Yes.
I was at the grocery store on Friday talking to one of the clerks who I see every Friday because they have the same weekly schedule, and so do I. And she was telling me her husband was coming up. She wouldn't be here next Friday because her husband was having major surgery next week, and she wasn't real specific about exactly what kind of surgery, but I told her that we would pray for him. His name is Robert Bowman. That's the husband.
Okay.
So,
All right.
not somebody that I know well, but a common acquaintance. I see her there all the time.
Absolutely. And yeah, if God gives you the opportunity to follow up and say, we did pray. How's your husband doing? That's an encouraging thing for.
Well, that was just
family.
on Friday, this past Friday when we were there. She told me. I actually remembered right away.
Good.
So now if I remember to pray for him, this is good, and then I can remember to ask her how he's doing.